All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. We are in here. We're about to start rocking and rolling. So, appreciate you guys for checking out the podcast episodes the past couple of days as we've been rolling. Content's coming out and we're trying to get it out there to you as best we can and as fast as possible. But we'll also make sure that we're covering some topics that people are interested in and stuff that have some relevance. So today, what we're going to dive into is the issue with CDLs, right? Commercial driver license, right? So this stuff affects obviously the big rigs and stuff like that rolling down the road and things of that nature. So we're going to get ahead and start with checking out this video clip first. So let's check it out.
Shows the moment a truck driver makes an illegal U-turn on the turnpike, causing a deadly crash in St. Lucie County. The victims in that vehicle, all from South Florida, they did not survive.
And tonight, that truck driver you saw in the video is in custody. CBS News Miami's Jim Berry is here with more on the concerns being raised about him. Jim?
Yeah, of course, guys, this all happened last Tuesday. Florida's Attorney General says the driver was an undocumented migrant who somehow got a commercial driver's license in California. TikTok videos, as you guys pointed out, showed that driver, Harshinger Singh, making that illegal U-turn with his big rig. The truck ended up blocking all of the northbound lanes of the turnpike while a minivan slammed into the truck and then got pinned underneath. Two passengers, a 37-year-old woman from Pompano Beach and a 54-year-old man from Miami, were killed instantly. The 30-year-old minivan driver from Florida City died later at a hospital. Their names, by the way, have not been released. The accident created an enormous traffic backup on the turnpike and prompted Florida's Attorney General to point the finger at another state.
Now, if you're checking this out, man, like the one thing I would say from watching this video is obviously folks lost their lives, which is a tragic thing. But then at the same time, look at this dude, man, and this cat has no emotion on his face. Like none. Zero. No emotion. So I'm like, okay, somebody make that make sense. No emotion on your face. Stuff's going on. Like, come on now. How's that supposed to work? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's not cool. We need to do something about that, right? Like that somebody needs, like, something needs to be going on. So you get that going on, right? And then it makes you want to take a deep dive into this whole process with the CDL. Like they're saying that the guy got a CDL license in California. Now, for doing research and digging up some stuff, you come to find out that there is federal guidelines for a person to get their commercial driver's license. However, each state has their own breakdown for training, requirements, and things of that nature. So for me, I'm like, okay, if you're looking at this from a broad perspective, I would compare it to like when it comes to gun control. Right. So you look at gun control, you have your federal guidelines for certain things, certain aspects, certain training requirements, certain things that need to be done. Mainly the biggest thing is the background check, right? Every state requires you to have some kind of background check before you can get your hands on before you get your hands on a weapon. Now, obviously, if people steal somebody else's weapon, your parents don't, when you have school shooters, you find out the kid took a parent's weapon, did what they did and all that kind of stuff. Okay, cool. So, but at the standard for somebody to be able to actually grab a gun legally, because you got your hot weapons floating around on the street. But to legally be able to grab or get possession of a weapon, you have to go through a process, right? You have to get a background check and all that kind of stuff. So when it comes to CDLs, why not it be the same thing, right? So, and then you topple that with this issue of, obviously, you have the issue of immigration, things of that nature, how that's going on, and how all that is playing out as a whole. So obviously, when one of the things that's come up when it comes to federal guidelines is the fact that CDL drivers are required to be able to speak English. Now, that goes back to, like I said on previous videos, when it comes to people coming into the country and trying to do things and make a home for themselves in the country, about assimilating to the country that you're living in, moving into. So one of those things being, if you're in America, the primary language in America is English. So yes, you should be required to speak English. Now, if you dig into the federal guidelines when it comes to the CDL requirement for speaking English, it just says that they have to be able to speak English enough to be able to communicate if they're stopped, to ask questions, and be able to read the signs and stuff like that on the road. Now, that's kind of like, it's kind of like almost like a fresh layer of understanding, if that makes sense. Because if you're not required to be able to speak it fluently, but you just have to be functional in speaking it. How many times have you come across people that they speak, halfway functional English? Hell, half the people that live in America don't speak full functional English. So it's one of those things. But if you're thinking about somebody on the road operating machinery, an 18-wheeler, for example, something that's very big, takes up a lot of space on the road, and when it comes to maneuvering that vehicle and not have a proper experience, or two, being able to communicate properly if there is some kind of safety hazard, an issue, that becomes a safety issue for not just the driver, obviously, but also for all the people on the road. Working in safety, when you come across things from a safety standpoint about having a safety standard. So you think for commercial truck drivers, they're not just driving just, plain trailers with just cargo in it. Some of these trucks are driving hazardous material, flammable material, chemicals, and things of that nature, to where if there was some kind of accident, case in point, this one was just pretty much like a freight truck. If you were driving something like gasoline or some kind of hazardous material, and this happened, you would have a major safety issue all over that road, because now you got chemicals exposed, you got all kinds of stuff going on, not to mention the potential for explosions and all kinds of other stuff going on. But then if you have a driver in a situation that can't communicate properly what the issue is, what the safety concern is, you see what I'm talking about, where that becomes an overall broader, bigger problem. So as you look at the discussion of things that are going on, from just how the way things are broken down, like I said, you have your federal oversight, while you have your federal oversight, which the FMCSA sets the baseline for CDL requirements. State maintain control over insurance and enforcement. This patchwork system contributes to licensing inconsistencies, with some states adopting more lenient rules for economic or political reasons. Obviously, politics always comes into play, right? Why is that? Because some of these bigger trucking companies within these states pay, obviously, like with everything else when it comes to politics, who is contributing to the campaign. It's like you scratch my back, I scratch yours, right? I'm sliding money or paying to a campaign. I'm paying to a campaign to be able to get certain benefits and things of that nature. Well, in regards to CDLs, when this is going on, obviously this is the kind of stuff that you're coming across, and these are the kind of loopholes that you're getting, right? Local flexibility can undermine national safety standards without strong federal guardrails. Now think about that. So that means from a state standpoint, which obviously people freak out about this because they're like, don't take power away from the state. In certain aspects of certain things, I agree. But then at the same time, if you're talking about something where you're talking about a national standard where people are driving from state to state and there not being a clear-cut standard across the board, especially when it comes to CDLs, to me, that presents an issue. It presents an issue from a variety of standpoints, one of the biggest ones being a safety standpoint for the people being on the road and having to be around these people while they're driving, while they're actively moving these vehicles, and they don't have proper paperwork. Now, if you want to be even and call a spade, keep it fair, using logic, right? Hence the name of the podcast. But using logic, if you have a situation where you have somebody that doesn't speak proper English, and that's not saying that they're illegal, say somebody does here and they have proper paperwork to be here in the country, but their English is not the best so they can communicate effectively. They get to a way station, they stop, they get questions, they can't answer the questions, and then they get let go. They get a ticket and they let them move on. As opposed to if it's a person that's from America, been here, lived here, whatever, they get stopped at a way station and something's not right with paperwork or communication. They get held, they get detained, they call in the folks for the way station, or whoever the officials are for those way stations come in, and now you might end up getting put in jail because stuff is not correct. So that right there it's already an inconsistency with how things are handled when it comes to a certain standard. Now, you've seen videos, and I'm pretty sure I can probably put another one. You've seen videos of stuff where you'll see a person get stopped, they start asking questions, and the person can't communicate in English, and then they end up pulling the person out, detaining the person, and things of that nature, right? So that helping maintain a safety standard. People will say, well, if you force somebody to speak English to be able to operate a vehicle, that can be considered discrimination. To me, it's not discrimination. It's a safety standard. It's about setting and having a standard to begin with. If you don't have a standard when it comes to people operating machinery, now you're opening yourself up to situations, case in point, like the situation in Florida, where people lost their lives because this person was operating a vehicle not properly, and then people end up getting killed. Not to mention, the person's not legal to be here, one, and two, the person finessed the system, in a sense, to be able to get a CDL license. Now, somebody explain to me where that makes sense. How is it okay for somebody to finesse the system to be able to get a license to operate a vehicle based off of whatever state, and I think the state was California, for whatever state guidelines stuff that they have to be able to push stuff through so people get ahead and start rolling? Like, somebody explain to me how that's okay. It's not. if you're going to operate in a way for everything being safe and make sure everything's copacetic and make sure stuff is supposed to be the way it is, then hold the standard. So a lot of times with these situations, like obviously, like I said, there's federal guidelines and federal standards to it. And then you have from a state standpoint, them being able to control and set their things in motion. Me personally, which people give pushback about this, because when it comes up as a point of topic and a point of a solution to fix it, everybody freaks out, especially now, because God forbid the guy that's in office now says anything, everybody go crazy, which trips me out because it ain't just him. You got other people floating around that everybody's getting their cut, especially from the local state level, of getting their cut from these big companies, stuff like that, to be able to push this stuff through and pass through certain legislation. Like I said, if you know anything about politics, this happens all the time. So it's not just in reference to the trucking industry with the CDL process. But a solution, like I said, to fix this, one, I would say, is establish a stronger mandatory federal baseline for CDL testing and training. So what does that mean? That means have a no crap, hard, steadfast standard that is there, that's in place, and it's ready to rock and roll. Why do you have that? So you have that so like you have a no crap standard. Like if you look at this stuff from CDLs, you have medical screenings that you have to go through. But those medical screenings are not the same across the states because each state is able to set their precedent for how they're operating within the licensing process, which to me blows my mind. Because if I have a state that has a strict policy and somebody goes to that state, tries to get a CDL because they have a medical issue, they are denied a license. But now they go to a state where, it's a little bit more lenient over here. Cool. They get a license. Now this person's license gets on the road. Something happens from a medical standpoint that compromises them from being able to operate this vehicle properly and safely, and they cause an accident or end up killing somebody. Who's responsible? Who's the person that's going to be held to the fire? Obviously, the person operating the vehicle is going to be held to it, but then it's like, where's the extra digging? How are the people that are finessing the system and manipulating the system for people to get licensing, how are these people not held responsible? Accountability, especially when you're talking about something that is detrimental of you operate. Same as like if you get a regular license, you have to get a license to be able to operate a vehicle on the road. Now you get a bunch of people driving around with no license, stuff like that. Okay, cool. I mean, it's not cool, but it happens. But when they get caught, they get the book thrown at them. Now they can't operate a vehicle legally for an extended period of time. That's one of the penalties. Then they get caught again doing it. Now they end up in jail. But in the case of these people finessing the system, doing all kinds of weird stuff, moving stuff around, how is that cool? Like, how does that happen? Like, check out some of the key loopholes that I came across, right? Key loopholes and regulatory issues, vulnerability and state level CDL testing and training standards. So each state doesn't even have they have their standard, but the standard is not the same per state. So if the standard is not the same per state, how can I make sure that the people getting on the road operating these vehicles, everybody's operating at the same capacity? They're not. That's an issue. Then you got, I was talking about, the inconsistent English proficiency enforcement. So you have a standard that is in place, but it's not being enforced. Somebody explain that to me and make that make sense. So you have a standard, but nobody wants to enforce a standard. And then what happens? When the standard does start getting enforced, there's pushback on it. And this is what I talked about before when I was talking about people taking stuff at face value and not actually doing the digging. See, it's quick for somebody to take something and take it as a highlight and make it a thing. Oh yeah, man, this is wrong. They enforce stuff on people. No, it's a standard. Now, why was the standard lax for the reason that it is? Who knows? Like I said, you got political aspects that come into all this stuff, which is messed up. When you're talking about somebody, you're talking about a safety standard, but it's like the same with everything else. You got the folks on the low level, you got the folks in the middle, and you got the folks at the top. When the stuff is affecting the folks at the bottom, nobody at the top is really paying attention. Nobody care. The middle folks might look at it a little bit like, yeah, somebody might need to do something about it, but nobody's doing anything to move the needle. Then if it affects somebody at the top, now all of a sudden, that's where the change comes in. This is where people want to look at things, look at the standard, like, okay, hey, we might need to make some moves here, make some adjustments. Why? Because now it's affecting them. Same thing with everything else. Then you got the use of another loophole, use of sanctuary states to obtain license by undocumented immigrants. So here comes the immigration thing coming back up again. Another hot topic going on in the country right now. But when it comes to CDLs, it's another big topic. Why? Because a lot of times, and a lot of this stuff comes down to, if you want to get down to nitty gritty, it comes down to dollars and cents. If I'm a person running a company, okay, I have people here in the States that's been around, been working for a while, has experience. They're going to want a certain amount of wages based off of their experience and what they do. It's called fair compensation. Now, if I could take somebody that, okay, not really documented, they kind of going to come in and just work for whatever we give them. All right, cool. Let's get ahead and roll that way. And then this is the situation that you have going on, where you have people that are not documented getting CDLs, getting on the road and driving because they are a cheaper wage, and this is how companies are finessing the system, so they don't have to pay out like they should, or paying people a fair wage, which is a whole nother ball of wax, right? Then you got weak federal oversight over CDL school quality and accountability. So again, now this falls back on the federal government piece, right? So who in the federal government actually going through reviewing these schools in these states and making sure that they're meeting a standard or holding to at least the minimum federal standard, whether how light that is or how strict it is? There should be some kind of review looking at these training schools. Just call a spade, man. You can literally go on Google right now, type in CDO training school, hit enter. It'll give you a crap ton list of them. Now you got a few that you have if you have your big, like kind of, I would say big, like kind of national schools where like, I think it was like a UTI in Virginia was one. It sounded like an infection or something like that. But I forgot the name of the school, but it was one of those kind of technical trade schools where they did CDL. Big school. Go in, you apply, do your whole stuff, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then you get your CDL. But then you kind of find out when you start digging, there are small little schools around where people kind of, however they set it up to get their licensing or whatever to be able to run the school, they do that, and then they're getting rock and rolling, putting schools and stuff up and letting this stuff roll, training people. But then what are the standards that they're training them to? Well, you got your minimal federal stuff that people kind of quasi doing and quasi not doing, because the state, you might be in a state where the rules are a little bit lax, where they're not hammering as hard on certain aspects of certain training requirements for you to get your CDL. They kind of giving you a general basics. Hey, this is how you put the truck in gear. This is how you back into a trailer, whatever the situation is. I don't know. I've never been to a CDL school, but I'm just saying in general, like, this is when you're talking about having a lax standard. These are the kind of things that can come up where somebody's getting just a bare minimum to get them operating, to get them rolling, and they're missing all the regular nuances that you would get from, one, proper training, and two, having a proper experience. They just grab people, throwing them on the road, and it's like, okay, cool, whatever happens, happens. Then another one, you got potential for reduced English communication due to, like I said, multilingual EODs, right? So the EOD stands for the electronic login device, right? Electronic login system. So one of the things I was looking at when I was digging into this is I was like, okay, so trucking, you have logs. Truckers have standards put on them so they can't drive for an extended period of time, right? So they might be able to drive. I think the max they can drive is maybe 12 hours. If I'm wrong, I'll correct it later. But I believe it's max 12 hours. Max you can drive is 12 hours. After 12 hours, you got to stop. You got breaks, lunches, and stuff like that. And all that stuff has to be logged. Now, would it be an electronic? Now, what does that mean? So the folks that don't speak English properly or fluently enough can now set this thing to whatever their native tongue is. Okay, cool. Most people like, that's not an issue. That's good. That means they can document their stuff correctly and everything can be done like it's supposed to be. Okay, cool. But if that's the case, that means they're still not being proficient when it comes to English, which is per the federal guide. There is one of the requirements to be able to operate and be able to have your CDL. You need to be able to speak and communicate in English. So the electronic log is kind of giving them a cheat sheet. But they still might be, you're still at disadvantage because they can't speak proper English or understand English. If a person comes up and asks them a question about something, they can't, if they don't know and understand English, they can't really look in the log to be able to pull the information. So you're still stuck in a hole. It's mind blowing, man. Like, you start looking at this stuff. That's why I tell people, man, like, do some digging, look into it. It is insane. It is insane. Right, undocumented driver, like we were just looking at the undocumented driver from California, Washington, reignited debate, obviously after this crash. So this is why this topic came up, which is one reason why I'm talking about it. Despite failing, and so here's the thing: he didn't failing the language and sign test. Like, this dude failed a language and sign test and is still operating a commercial vehicle. Somebody make this thing make sense to me, because it is not. I use, for example, in Virginia, if you're going to get your license in Virginia, this is your regular driver's license. Got my driver's license when I'm in Virginia. Before you even get to the written piece, right? That's the actual questions and all that kind of stuff. Before you even get to that, you got to pass the road signs. And let me tell you, how many people I know a crap ton of people fail. You ain't even make it to the actual test because you couldn't get 10 road signs right. 10. And you see these signs all the time when you ride down the road, for the most part. They throw a couple of ones in there that you normally don't see on a regular basis to kind of trip you up. But if you studied and knew the information, you wouldn't have an issue. So case in point, you got a driver that can't speak English proficiently. He can't understand road signs. So obviously that sign on the road that says, hey, don't make a U-turn here. Brother was like, just and boom, got an accident going on. Then the fact that the trips me out, this is just a personal thing. Trips me out about it is the fact the dude has no emotion on his face. No emotion. Blink. He just, like, you would think I'm illegal, right? So you don't have proper documentation. 2, CDL license. Oh man, I might lose this because this looks pretty bad. No reaction. Blank. Stone face. And that's something that when people see that, like, obviously this stuff's been all over the web, news and stuff like that. People see that and they're like, man, what in the world is going on? People get pissed off. Like, Officer Tatum did a video about it, and shout out to Officer Tatum because they do just be putting stuff out there like crazy. But he was like, yo, man, you might need to merge some people off. If you are not legal here in the country, and I know this sparks a big debate, and this is just my viewpoint on it. If you're not legally able to be here, like you don't have proper documentation, stuff like that, like you're here illegally, that is an issue. People are like, oh, but the person been here X, Y, and Z time. I get that. But if you don't even have a basic visa and you're here, come on now. Like, some people they talking about kicking people out and all that kind of stuff. Look, man, it's about, like I said, it's talking about with this, it's about having a standard and maintaining a standard. What's the purpose of having a standard if you're not going to stick to it? Like, that's the stuff that comes up, and it's like, come on, man, make it make sense. You can't have a standard for something and then just let everybody just, do whatever, gaff off, however they want to move, they move. It's okay. Nobody say anything. Everything's rocking and rolling. And it's not an issue. That presents a problem because now you're structurally compromising yourself. And when you're structurally compromised, everything else goes out the window. Everything goes out the window. Then you end up with a broken system where people are scheming, making moves, sliding through, coming up whatever when they want to come up with to be able to get ahead. And it's a detriment to everybody else. Like, if you're in charge of safety, how does this thing not being standardized not cause an issue? Like, somebody explain to me, make it make sense. Like, there is no way in the world people can just walk around and be like, it's not that big of a deal, let it fly. Like, each state's doing their own thing. Like, if it was me, like if I was able to get somewhere in office to be able to set some rules and make some changes, and obviously we can vote and stuff like that. But like I said, it goes down to who you're voting for, and when they get in, if they actually want to stick to the stuff that they said about changing and fixing stuff when they get in. You look at this and you're like, okay, cool. Me, how would I fix this issue? Because you can't, stand a rule like it was in the military. Don't bring me a problem without bringing me a solution. Now, I'm not saying your solution is the greatest, but bring me something tangible. You got to meet me in the middle. Right? So if I was fixing this, how would I fix it? My proposed solutions for fixing the CDL issue. No expert, just little old me. Know some CDL drivers. One in particular, been doing it for a while. So how would I fix this? Okay, let's look at it. Establish a stronger mandatory federal baseline for CDL training and testing. Right? So lock it down. Make it stricter. Make it stricter. Put the clamps on. So that you tighten and rein. So like same thing if you was doing with a child. If you cool, want to be one of the cool parents and kids run around doing all kinds of crazy stuff, what happened? Eventually you got to crack down and tighten the reins to get the kids back in check. Now, in most cases, when you talk about stuff like this, it's easier to start stricter and then loosen it up down the road. If you start loosening and try to tighten, then you end up with the stuff where like people talking about the English piece has already been in there for years. Now that they want to enforce it, people like that's wrong. Y'all can't do that. It's not wrong. It's the standard. It's in there. Just that people were letting it slide. Now they're starting to crack down on it. People got an issue. That's one. 2, require federal approval for any state level modifications. So what does that mean? The federal would set the standard for everybody. This is the law. This is how we're operating. This is how we're doing this. That's 1. 2, the states will still have their space to operate and do what they need to do. However, they still would have to be required to follow what the federal standard is. Now, if there's any way where states like, hey, we need to modify this because we got X, Y, and Z going on, or we have a trend of this or whatever, cool. That needs to be submitted and cleared by whoever the person in the federal government that will be overseeing it is, would have to look at that and be like, okay, cool, case by case basis. Why? So if you're doing this, now you get to stop the states from doing this shady stuff with some of these major companies or whatever, or however they're structuring it, so that they can't do some low level stuff, slide a person in, make, just, hey, let's let this person, let's let them slide, man, so they can get the CDL, so we can get it rolling. No, none of that. Federal standard. You have to be able to meet the federal standard to be able to comply and be able to get your CDL. All right. So standardized English proficiency testing across all states. Simple. Like I said, setting that standard across the board for everybody. Everybody. So then you won't have this thing where you got some states a little bit lax here, some states a little bit stricter here. No, across the board, everybody got to rock the same thing. You have the thing that blows my mind, especially when it comes to the stuff with immigration and all that kind of stuff here in the U.S. and all that kind of stuff. And people make it seem like you're being insensitive when you say this, but it's the truth. If you leave the USA and go to any other country in the world, whether that's Mexico, France, freaking wherever, Russia, wherever you're going, Japan, you need to be able to assimilate to their native tongue in order to be able to survive and function in that country. You have to. That is a standard across the board. That's what has to happen. So here in the US, it should be the same thing. You shouldn't get a pass. And then it's like in this culture where everybody want to be so sensitive and, oh, I don't want to say that because I don't want to offend anybody and all that. Man, forget that. If you're making your way into a place, you need to be able to assimilate to that particular place. If the native tongue in that place is English, you need to learn English. That doesn't mean you disregard your native tongue and you forget how to speak your own language. No, that's not what I'm saying. But if you are in the USA, function in American markets and doing stuff like that, you need to be able to speak English. Sorry. That's just the way I feel about it. Call me wrong. People get upset about it, but it's the truth. If you are in the USA, you need to be able to speak English. Simple, to the point. Why? All the road times are in English, right? 2, if something happens from a safety standpoint, you need to be able to communicate properly with the proper authorities to be able to fix and correct the issue, or for one, to be able to make sure that the issue is handled safely and correctly so that you're not exposing other people to a worse situation than what has already occurred. Truck drivers driving hazardous waste material or whatever it is, gets into an accident, there's a chemical fire there and something's going on. Now, obviously, all the logs and stuff like that are there, but how are they going to be able to get to these logs right off the rip? No, necessarily. I mean, they probably could. I don't know, for example. I'm just making an assumption. So, something like that happens. The driver jumps out the truck. Authorities show, emergency response teams and stuff show up, and they're like, hey, okay, what we got here? This person don't speak English. So now he can't even tell the firefighters, like, hey, I got X, Y, and Z chemical over there. This is what the deal is, blah, blah, blah. Why is that information important? Because if you have a certain chemical fire, certain chemicals react to water differently. So now if you have a chemical that chemical and water don't play nice together, firefighters show up, they crack the water hose open, spray this thing. Now you got a major reaction, and then you got to make you got a way worse situation than what it was off the rip, because they weren't equipped to be able to handle the situation properly because they didn't have the proper information. See how this is working? See how this is playing out? It all flows together. All right. Improve oversight and auditing of CDL schools. So again, it goes back to that federal standard. Setting the federal standard and having a board or commission or however they want to set it up to be able to look at these schools and make sure that these schools are meeting the standard. So you can't have, I don't know if they do, a mom and pop type CDL school. Why? I mean, you can, but there has to be a standard. You have to be able to meet the federal guidelines and standard before you can open up a school. Same as with the folks that have driving schools. There's a standard for you to be able to operate a school. One, from being able to teach driving, for example, one, and then two, all the other aspects that come with owning a business and all that kind of stuff. Like, that stuff has to be regulated and literally set that standard so that you don't have that issue. Now, then the last one, which is a big part of it, create coordinated protocols for immigration, licensing, and background checks. This one, I think, is probably one of the smartest ones that I thought of when I was thinking about this, because you have somebody that's in a state and they are not a legal citizen, but they're trying to they have a background of experience of driving, maybe from their country or whatever situation may be. Cool. And maybe it is what it is. But if that's the case, there needs to be some kind of cross check. So what does that mean? Obviously, the biggest push right now was getting the criminal illegals out of the U.S. Now, people are saying they run around just snatched up random people. I'm pretty sure it has happened at points of time, but that is not the full case. And there's no trying to get the full story. People like, you need to do your research. So in that regard, when it comes to stuff like that, do your research. But for example, what I'm saying is, if a person is not legal here in the States and they're in the state trying to get a CDL, there needs to be some kind of run through a national system to double check and verify what's up with this person before they get issued a CDL. Keeping the standard. So now you avoid the situation where you got a person that's illegal and it's not supposed to be here having a CDL because they worked their way through some kind of loophole through their company or whatever to be able to acquire a CDL. So I'll repeat these again. My proposed solutions for fixing this issue: 1, establish a stronger mandatory federal baseline for CDL testing and training. 2, require federal approval for any state level modifications to the federal standard. 3, standardize English proficiency testing across all states. So setting that standard for, if these folks are going to be driving a vehicle, especially a commercial vehicle, they need to be able to communicate certain information to, 1, authorities if they're stopped at a way station, 2, if there's an accident, being able to communicate information. Of course, also the biggest thing with that is being able to communicate with whatever customers that they're delivering to. But that can be fickle because they could be dropping off to a person that speaks their native tongue, so a whitewash. But when it comes to speaking with the authorities, getting stops and checks, they need to have that standard across the board. Improve oversight and auditing of CDL schools. So obviously looking at the schools, where the training coming from? What kind of standards are these people being taught? Are they being taught the right standards? Is the standard being taught correctly? Is the standard understood at the school so it can be taught correctly? All of that stuff plays in. And then the last one, like I said, create a coordinated protocol for immigration, licensing, and group background checks. So obviously that means verifying that these people say that they are who they are, 1, and 2, make sure that there is some kind of documentation on this person. Because say if they're doing stuff where they're doing it, they're like, okay, cool, they're doing it, they're trying to get a work visa or whatever, stuff like that. I don't know how that process works, but I'm just using that as an example. And they're trying to get clear and legal documentation to be able to function and operate here in the country. Okay, cool, I have no issues with that. If you're doing it the right way, I got no beef. If you're doing it the wrong way, we got an issue. Because when you're doing stuff the wrong way, stuff gets slipped through the cracks, people don't get the proper training and the proper understanding of what's going on, standards not being followed, and then you end up with situations like I showed earlier where somebody getting into an accident, stuff getting crazy. Like, these are the things that come up, and it's like, when you look at it, and people, with every situation that comes up, people are going to stand on opposite sides of the fence. Nobody's ever fully in agreement. But when situations like this happen, which are tragic, people lost their lives, it tends to make people open their eyes and be like, okay, maybe we do need to take a deeper look at this. Maybe we do need to get some better understanding of what it is and what the standard is when it comes to CDLs. A lot of times when everything, I believe, when it comes down to a lot of stuff, comes down to dollars and cents. A lot of times it comes down to cheaper labor, right? I've seen it. I worked at a company where they hired a crap ton of people that weren't from the country. A lot of folks that were coming in, some of them were documented, some of them were not. And they would just hire them because why? They would take the cheaper labor, as opposed to the people that are here and from the States, when they're like, you telling them, hey man, you got your experience and background, cool, it's this and the third. And then they'll be like, okay, look, starting off, we're going to offer you 15 and some change. People like, man, ain't enough money, but you coming fresh out of jail on parole, hey, you're going to take what you get usually. But then on the flip side to that is you got folks that are not from here, not documented, not fully legal, and it's 6 of them rolling together as a group. And it was usually about 4 to 5. So I'll say 4 of them rolling together as a group. And now they paying each one of them $10. Well, they paying you 15, they probably paying them 11 or 12. Try to keep it somewhat fair. But because they're willing to take the lower wage and work, and plus they're all squad up together, so they running all the bills together, doing what they need to do. They're doing it as a unit. This is why it's easier for them to take the lower wages. And then obviously an employer's like, they take lower wages, that's less money I got to pay on payroll, which means there's more money in my pocket. It all comes down to dollars and cents when you look at it from its totality. So I say in closing this episode of the podcast, when it comes to CDLs, and we out here like you look at the title says driving blind, CDL loopholes, stuff like that. The main thing about the loopholes that you see and identify is a lot of it is there's not a clear standard across the board from a federal standpoint to the state standpoint. And when you look at it, most people say there's not a clear way to truly fix this and get it situated. I believe it is. Like I said, I laid it out to you with the ones that I gave out. Setting a federal standard across the board, which that is the standard from a requirement standpoint, from a training standpoint, that is the standard. There's no way to go around it. And then from a state level, if they give the states a little wiggle room, if they want to make it stricter, but they're not able to make it lighter. So what that means is that they're trying to do something because, we got a situation going on where we know it's next Wednesday. They need to submit proper documentation to whoever authority would be for overseeing this thing to get clarification like, yes, you can or no, you can't. And if it's a no, it's a no. The standard is a standard, and that's how they're rolling. So if you're looking at this and you have thoughts and opinion on it, obviously, you can comment in the comment section and stuff like that. Give me your thoughts and opinion on it. But me personally, have the standard. If you got a standard, stick to it. So if you need to be able to speak English, you need to be able to speak English. It ain't no ifs, ands, what's about it. If you need to have proper documentation, get your proper documentation. Like, it shouldn't be a thing where people are skating by and slipping through the cracks when it comes to operating a commercial vehicle. It's too dangerous. Same thing with people finessing the system from a medical standpoint. And that's folks that are from here, because usually it might be some foreigners that's doing it too, but you get a lot of folks in the States, they got an issue, whether it's, say they got an issue with like sleeping or whatever, or something like that. And then they go into the doctor, get screened. The doctor's like, yeah, man, it's not going to work. But now you go to a state where the doctor's kind of like, it's all good, man. Everybody needs a fair opportunity. Now they let you get behind the wheel. You folks get behind the wheel. You crash and take out a bunch of people. Now everybody mourning and sad. Oh, this is so messed up, whatever. But no, hold the people accountable. Obviously can't hold the person accountable that caused wreck, because their accountability is they got to go talk to Jesus and explain that to the Lord. You just killed these people. What happened? But those people that issued the licensing, especially currently the way stuff is set up, people need to be held accountable, man. You got to hold people accountable. You can't let people just be out here doing all kinds of weird stuff and slipping through the system and slipping through the cracks. If you have a standard, maintain a standard. And if you are somebody that's not meeting the standard, tough luck. You need to get yourself together, get yourself squared away. Get yourself squared away. Do what you need to do to make sure that you can meet the standard that is set. And as long as you're meeting the standard, nobody will have any issues with you. But let you go to work, do what you do. People go mind their business, not bug anybody. But if you're not meeting the standard and you're not meeting the standard, it's going to cost somebody their life. That's a problem. So I say in closing, hey, folks, make sure you like, listen, and subscribe. You know what I'm saying? Come help out your boy here as we get this channel to grow. But even with that, like I said, just stick to the standard, man. Follow the rules. So I say follow the rules. I will catch you folks on the next go around. Y'all have a good one.